If you were to go back to Vermont in the mid-19th century, some of the mountains and landscapes may not look all that different from today, but back then, how Americans heard about or perceived the Green Mountain State sometimes came down to what was sung about it. And that history is here, in this sheet music. While it may not look like much, these pages hold the stories and ideas that informed and shaped the culture for a century.
Green hills of Vermont, where the cool pine forests are, and the arbutus bloom sweetly.
The sheet music collection at Champlain College tells a story, many stories in fact, of love, death, family, and what was expected of people in the world of northern New England. And that included gender roles.
So the special collections at Champlain College help us to understand the past in a way that you can't get from reading a history book or a journal article about the lives of everyday Vermonters using ordinary things like photographs and postcards, theater programs, and sheet music.
In Champlain Valley on a little hillside farm where I spent so many happy childish days. There I learned to love a maiden.
Sheet music was mostly used by middle-class families who could afford a piano. However, the music was used to capture the ears of anyone listening to rally behind a cause.
This is a very communal kind of art form, but it's singing and writing music even, playing music. It was something that pervaded all aspects of society.
Activists and politicians used music to promote their causes. Calvin Coolidge's presidential campaign exploited that practice. Coolidge found songwriters for these tunes in the Green Mountain State. Songs like Keep Cool and Keep Coolidge and Coolidge and Dawes for the nation's cause not only kept people's focus on politics, but also fed the perception of the presidential lifestyle. First Lady Grace Coolidge viewed music as a way to define culture in the White House.
She's probably most well known for the musicals, or musicals that they were called, that she put on at the White House when Calvin was vice president. It was in the East Room of the White House and would invite various classical dignitaries to play or sing at those musicals. It garnered a rather large audience.
Other songs in the collection also had the power to spread ideas quickly, to not only change public perception, but also laws. Take Little Brown Jug.
Ha ha ha, you and me, little brown jug, don't I love thee? Ha ha ha, you and me, little brown jug, don't I love thee?
A popular song with an upbeat tune, but also a sad story about a man and his bottle. The song follows a man who loves to drink, but as it goes on, it becomes clear it focuses on alcohol addiction and the problems that came with it.
There's the problem of the man who is supposed to be responsible being kind of lured away from being responsible by alcohol.
In the Prohibition era, songs like Little Brown Jug changed minds. A society without alcohol once seemed unthinkable in 19th century America. The Women's Christian Temperance Union used songs like this to change the attitudes of politicians and civic leaders about the use of alcohol.
Our attitudes about alcohol and drugs are all post-prohibition. And prohibition really actually works for the time that it's in place, in the sense of people's habits towards alcohol change.
These pieces of music also conveyed societal norms about beauty, romantic life, and family. Silver Lake March and Two-Step pictures a couple seemingly on a date.
The people who are illustrated on the cover of Silver Lake represent this kind of fashionable young couple. And I think that the way that they're dressed and the way they're portrayed both reflects high fashion for American clothing at the time, and then also might have influenced people who were purchasing the sheet music.
The man is tall, with broad shoulders, dressed in a suit, hat in hand. The woman is thin, young, and wearing a full-length dress. They're standing close together but are not touching. This romantic slow dance song communicates conservative ideas about how to dress for a date. The imagery of this cover provides a glimpse into societal norms. Much like today, female bodies were used to sell the music. Sheet music covers were often just as important as the music itself, since the cover was used to sell the music and followed popular trends to grab people's attention.
I think it's really interesting looking at the lithographs of the sheet music, because nowadays when we buy music, it's digital, it's different. But in those days, people would go down to music rooms, they'd look at the sheet music and they'd be attracted to this lovely cover. That would draw you in. So I think that resulted in a lot of sales. He had a beautiful cover design.
Other songs were even more explicit about the rules of love. Aha, meaning yes, is a song written by a woman about a man courting a young lady, trying to get her consent.
Will you kiss me? And she sighs, ah, when a honey girl like this tries to have you share a kiss, your love is sweet.
Well, in some ways, this song is almost like a portrayal of a conversation between a young man and a young woman. And on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. But if you look deeper, it's actually pretty complicated. It reflects a very traditional take on gender roles in which women weren't supposed to directly express their feelings of love and attraction or directly encourage a suitor. But depending on which way you read the song and the lyrics, you can see that women could kind of indirectly, in a roundabout way, express their feelings and get their feelings across to the person they were interested in.
In one way, Aha comes across as a cute-sounding song, but in another, it's a sort of time capsule and a template showing women how to show emotion. And while that song looks at the female perspective, Bachelor's Dream shows the ideal life of a man in 1873.
We have this portrayal of a young man who's fallen asleep leaning back in his chair. He's dreaming of what should be the ultimate goal for a young bachelor like him, having a young wife and a child. Through this piece, it's tapping into the social expectation for a young man to get married and not only have a family, but have the traditional nuclear family type headed by an opposite sex couple.
In the same way today's popular songs carry messages of what's cool and how to act, Bachelor's Dream made clear to young men the lives they were expected to lead. The song That Young Man Across the Way features a lady who allows a man to stare at her from afar.
So let him stare, I do not care, I shall not go away, young man.
It's only really in the 19th century that you begin to get women representing in artworks their feelings. Before that, poetry, drama and stuff, you'd have women who were speaking, but it was always women being looked at, or a man imagining a woman being looked at. And this is a really bizarre one because you would only find it beginning in the 19th century. I am being looked at.
Written by a woman in 1874, the song has themes of female empowerment and was a precursor to the women's suffrage movement in early 20th century Vermont. It was songs like That Young Man Across the Way, written to empower women of the time, that inspired another generation of activists and songwriters, Lena Cole being one of them, and another artist in the collection. In 1908, Cole composed 3 Cheers for Old Vermont, a nostalgia-filled tune about her home state.
I think we all have that longing for, what may have never happened, but the good old days. And I think especially at the turn of the century, of the last century, there was a great anxiety throughout the country, but also in Vermont. I think a lot of these songs reflected a longing for what at least people thought were the simple old days. And so often these songs were popular, I think, because they stirred up those emotions of a time of a golden age gone by, which, maybe never really existed.
Then, in 1914, Cole published Only a Bunch of Forget-Me-Nots, a sad ballad about a long-lost love. Throughout the song, Cole compares herself and her love to faded forget-me-nots.
Sweetest in my thoughts, my precious faded blue, forget me not.
Although it's late, it clearly refers to sort of that Victorian era flower symbolism of the 19th century. And certainly the forget-me-nots, that they called it true blue, and that reflected loyalty, fidelity, I will always remember you. And this song is so sweet because it talks about remembering someone you loved way back when, and all you have left is that bunch of forget-me-nots.
The sheet music of this time was used to define the status quo, sway the public, and even start movements. But people always had a soft spot for some nice Vermont nostalgia. No song better captures that than The Green Hills of Vermont I Love So Well.
Hills of Vermont, where the cool pine forests are, and the arbutus bloom sweetly in the dell.
Nostalgia at this period is also cutting edge. The pace of change was moving fast through the 19th century. At the turn of the 19th century, people are anxious about it. Vermont is a place that in the American imaginary is like America's home in some ways. So many of the Vermont men, they don't come back to live, but they come back to celebrate Old Home Week.
In 2020, popular music is listened to on streaming platforms and smartphones, but the values and issues talked about in the sheet music collection are still prevalent today.